Britain has a long history stretching back thousands of years. In every part, at some point, a bloody or mysterious event has taken place. Murders, bloodthirsty revenge, plagues, punishment and folklore will make your flesh creep in terror. This is Mysterious Britain, Tales of the Unknown. Anne Green was born around 1628 in Steeple Barton, Oxfordshire. Nothing is known about her childhood, and she didn't appear on any records until 1650, when she was working as a scullery maid in the house of Sir Thomas Reed, a justice of the peace who lived in nearby Duns Drew. Anne's youthful looks caught the attention of Sir Thomas's grandson, Geoffrey Reed, who was 16 or 17 years old at the time. The two would meet regularly, and it was rumoured that the two were deeply in love and intended to marry. But Sir Thomas eventually came to learn of his grandson's secret liaisons, being tipped off by another scullery maid who herself had an eye for Sir Thomas's grandson. He ordered Anne removed from the house, but Anne made it known that she was with child, and that Sir Thomas's grandson was the father. Sir Thomas, though deeply angered, decided to give Anne boarding at one of his isolated cottages in the countryside, where she was to give birth. The child would then be taken from her and passed off as the child of a distant cousin of Sir Thomas's family. Anne later claimed that this was untrue, and that she was not aware of her pregnancy until she miscarried in the privy, at just 17 weeks. Being only around 22 at the time, Anne was scared and unsure of what to do. She tried to conceal the remains of the fetus, but it was discovered and suspected of infanticide. Sir Thomas prosecuted Anne under the Concealment of Birth of Bastards Act 1624, under which there was a legal presumption that a woman who concealed the death of her illegitimate child had murdered it. In the following trial, a midwife testified that the fetus was too underdeveloped to have ever been alive, and several servants who worked with Anne testified that she had experienced issues for approximately 1 month before her miscarriage, which began after she laboured turning malt. In spite of the testimony, Anne was found guilty of murder and was hanged at Oxford Castle on the 14th of December 1650. At her own request, several of her friends pulled her swinging body, and a soldier struck her 4 times with the butt of his musket to ensure of her death. After half an hour, everyone believed her dead, so she was cut down and given to the University of Oxford physicians William Petty and Thomas Willis for dissection. The physicians opened Anne's coffin the following day and discovered that she had a faint pulse and was weakly breathing. Petty and Willis sought the help of their Oxford colleagues Ralph Bathurst and Henry Clerk. The group of physicians tried many remedies to revive Anne, including pouring hot cordial down her throat, rubbing her limbs, bloodletting, and applying a warm dressing to her breast. The physicians then placed her in a warm bed with another woman, who rubbed her and kept her warm. Anne began to recover quickly, beginning to speak after 12 to 14 hours, and eating solid food after 4 days. Within 1 month, she had fully recovered, aside from amnesia about the time surrounding her execution. The authorities granted Anne a reprieve from execution while she recovered, and eventually pardoned her, believing that the hand of God had saved her, demonstrating her innocence. Furthermore, Sir Thomas Reed died 3 days after Anne's execution, so there was no prosecutor to object to the pardon. After her recovery, Anne went to stay with friends in the country, taking the coffin with her. She married and had 3 children, and died in 1659. The scenic village of Peasenhall in Suffolk, England, was a typical place of its kind in the early 1900s. Everyone knew everyone else in the small community. They also knew everyone's business. Any secrets and affairs were quickly part of local conversations among the gossip mongers. In the winter months of 1901 and early spring of 1902, 22-year-old servant girl Rose Harsant had often found herself the topic of conversation. Rose, who lived in the servants' quarters at Providence House, wasn't short of male admirers. In fact, she is believed to have often encouraged many of them in their pursuit of her. She would openly request they send her love letters, many of which were raunchy and left little to the imagination. Most men worked in Smith's Seed Drill Works and attended the Methodist Chapel in Sibton. The choirmaster of the chapel was William Gardiner, and the choir members included 22-year-old Rose Harsant, a servant at Providence House in Peasenhall, employed by Mr. and Mrs. Crisp. Mrs. Crisp attended the Congregational Methodist Chapel in Peasenhall, known as the Doctor's Chapel, and one of Rose's tasks included cleaning there. William Gardiner was seen entering the chapel by a Mr. Wright while Rose was cleaning there, and rumours started to circulate, rumours that made their way back to Gardiner's wife and 6 children. A church investigation ensued, chaired by the Reverend John Guy, but nothing concrete was established. Gardiner threatened to sue the man who had spread the rumours. On the morning of the 1st of June 1902, Rose Harsant's body was discovered by her father, William Harsant, in the kitchen at the bottom of the stairs leading to her room in the attic. She was lying in a pool of her own blood, throat cut, with gashes on the shoulders and stab wounds. Her nightdress was burned and parts of her body charred, as if someone had attempted to set fire to her remains. She had been dead for roughly 4 hours and was later found to have been 6 months pregnant at the time of death. The cause of death was initially suspected to be suicide, but upon further investigation of Harsant's wounds and the surrounding evidence, the police concluded that she had been murdered. Due to the rumours surrounding his relationship with Rose, as well as circumstantial evidence found at the crime scene, William Gardiner became the main suspect of the crime. He was arrested and taken into custody by local police on the 3rd of June 1902. It was alleged that Gardiner was the father of the unborn child. Gardiner held a position of some prominence in his employment as a foreman at the local seed drill works. He lived on the main street of Peasenhall with his wife and 6 children in a semi-detached cottage within sight of Providence House, where the murder was committed. William Gardiner was tried twice at Ipswich Asseries, held in the County Hall, the first trial beginning on the 7th of November 1902 and lasting 3 days, the second beginning on the 20th of January. At each trial the jury was unable to reach a verdict. It was said that at the first trial the jury was split 11-1 in favour of guilty, and the second 11-1 in favour of not guilty. The prosecution then issued a writ of novel prosequi. This was distinct from the usual process of a formal acquittal. The consequence of this is that Gardiner is one of the few people in English history to have been tried for murder and to have no verdict ever returned. Gardiner died in 1941. As he had not been found either innocent or guilty, he was never formally acquitted. He had remained under a cloud of suspicion up to and following his death. Maggie Hillsborough was the illegitimate daughter of the Lord of Fale, a renowned and feared warlock. Her father instructed her in the profession, and she proved to be a skilled pupil. Maggie took up a public house in Ayr and continued to dispense the wines of the country to the Burridges for a full half-century. At night, after she had finished the work of the day, she did not retire to rest, but muttering her charms, she rose into mid-air and made trips to Galloway, where she disported herself after the manners and customs of her kind, bewitching cattle, turning ale sour, charming wives and maidens, and generally misconducting herself. She was accompanied by little imps, whose feet were so hot they burned up the grass on top of Carrick Hill, and marked a highway known as Maggie's Gate to Galloway. There is a bridge north of Ballock known as Maggie's Bridge. The legend tells how Maggie came to bear a grudge against a particular family and cursed their house to be engulfed by snow. The only survivor was a sailor who happened to be away at sea, so a storm was conjured up which sank his ship with all hands. Maggie soon began to suspect that her maid had discovered her secret. One night, while the maid was brewing beer, a gang of ferocious cats invaded the outhouse and threw themselves at her, trying to tumble her into the boiling vat. Grabbing a ladle, the girl splashed the steaming liquid over her assailants, giving special attention to their leader. The next day, Maggie, who was an expert shapeshifter, stayed in her bed, and it turned out that she had been badly scolded. The maid told all she knew to the town's minister, William Adair, and Maggie was tried, convicted, and sentenced to be burned at the Malt Cross. Maggie made one last bizarre request for 2 new plates that had never been washed to be brought to her. Her request was granted, though one of the plates was accidentally dropped into a stream and dried off before delivery. As the flames started to consume her body, Maggie placed the plates behind her back, and they changed into wings. Unfortunately for Maggie, the plate that was dropped into the stream did not develop properly, and she struggled to take flight. A guard, close to the fire, hooked her by the skirt and forced Maggie back down into the fire, where she succumbed to the flames and passed into legend.